Over the past 10 years, human trafficking has grown exponentially. It's in our country,
our cities,
our homes.
Today, millions of children are trapped in modern-day slavery. Can it end? We've done it before.
History has shown that when enough dedicated people rally together, change is inevitable. All it can take is 10 minutes,
10 letters,
$10.
10 people telling others about the horrors of this industry. Human trafficking is the human rights issue of our time.
But it doesn't have to be.
Let's end it.
Welcome to Zoe International's Hope in Action livestream. I'm Esther Yu, Zoe's Western Regional Director. For those hearing about Zoe for the first time, our mission is to reach every person with God's love and rescue every child from human trafficking. We're committed to ending child trafficking in our lifetime through prevention, by educating the public and providing tools to protect themselves, through rescue, by joining law enforcement on operations to help identify and recover victims, and through restoration by connecting survivors with support and resources that they need for their future. Today, we'll be talking about Zoe's support on law enforcement operations, both in Southeast Asia and in the United States, to identify and support victims of human trafficking. And we will also have a special guest today joining us from Los Angeles Police Department's Internet Crimes Against Children. So today we have the privilege of speaking with David Cox, Zoe's USA National Director, and Brad Ortenzi, Zoe's Eastern Regional Director. Hi, Dave. Hi, Brad.
Great to be with you, Esther.
Thanks for joining us today. Would you both be able to share your Zoe story and what brought you to this work?
Yeah, go ahead, Brad. You can jump in first.
So I'm located here in Pennsylvania, and prior to my entry into Zoe International, I was a detective for over 20 years. And my latter part of my career, I started working with ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. And it was a shorter little stint. I was doing that on top of my regular work. And it was at that time where I really started seeing the abuse and the sexual exploitation of children with that work. And it kind of propelled me into, I wanted to do work specifically with children and to specifically help protect children. So simultaneously, my wife and I felt a call to ministry, and we heard about Zoe, and it kind of had a little of both things in with that package. So we contacted Zoe and ended up going to Thailand to meet the founders of Zoe, Mike and Carol Hart, and walk the land. And it was there when I saw the children that had been rescued from human trafficking, and they were actually doing really well. There was something in that I wanted to be a part of. So it wasn't quite the best time, but I put in early retirement papers and ended up going to Thailand. So I've been was with Thailand and with Zoe for 5 years, and now I'm here in Pennsylvania. It's going on 6 years now. So I've been with Zoe total of 11 years. Just wanting to do the best for children.
Thanks, Brad. And I'm just so incredible that you joined the team. And I had the privilege of being able to be in Thailand with you and your wife. So it's been amazing to see just the transition and everything you've been able to bring to the East Coast as well. Dave, if you could share a bit about your story.
Yes. So my story started in 2017. I actually was doing a trip out to Thailand to vet the organization on behalf of a church. I was pastoring at the time, and the church, Zoe had come on the radar for the church. And so we were going to send a couple of us out there just to check out the organization, vet it, which is a really sneaky thing to do, because when you see all those kids who have been radically transformed, it was a shocking experience to walk on a campus and the presence of God being so thick. Meeting the amazing staff and the amazing missionary teams that work with those kids day in and day out, and seeing radical life change. I know the horrors and the abuses that those kids have endured, and to see changed lives and knowing that there's more changed lives needed to have out there, it began to tug at my heart in an incredible way. My wife and I began to pray about it, and it was about a year-long process, but we chose to step out of a great ministry that we were doing. We had the full support of the church, and then we stepped into Zoe International And we began our journey in 2018, but it started with an exploratory trip, and I found that several of our staff had that same experience. They went out there and they saw the radical power of God doing what he does. He's the rescuer, he's redeemer, and he's restorer. And it definitely captured my heart. So my background in ministry, I also have a background in law enforcement. And those really seemed like I could use some of my background to help move anything I can do to help move Zoe forward in the next step or help rescue another child.
Thanks, Dave. And we're so grateful that you said yes to the call. You both have been on law enforcement operations in Southeast Asia. Brad, could you describe just the great work that the law enforcement is doing out there? Zoe loves to collaborate alongside law enforcement, alongside the government in the countries that we are in. If you could share a bit about the amazing work that they're doing out there.
Yeah, sure. And it was just a privilege to be there firsthand and to watch them work and do what they do. They do a lot of things very well. Specifically, the coordination between social services and law enforcement is almost seamless in some of the areas that we worked with. So they do a great job. But, there, I would say operations look a little bit different, specifically with children. There's times where children are taken in stings and in operations and delivered right to Zoe right into our child rescue center for the beginning part of their assessment, for the beginning part of what services and what they need there. So it was always just great to watch that whole process. And I got a front seat to that whole thing, not only to be with police on these stings and operations, but also then to see these girls, mostly there was boys and girls, but mostly it was girls, to watch the transformation then once they came to Zoe and just be a part of watch what God's doing in that redemption and healing process. Law enforcement is doing a lot of great work all over the world, but specifically we've noticed that and I've seen that firsthand in Southeast Asia, doing a lot of great investigations. A lot of it is through CSAM work and a lot of it through social media work. And then that culminates into them knocking on doors with search warrants and taking down places that where these girls are doing most of their work.
Shifting to the United States, Brad, what does collaboration look like on operations in Berks and Lancaster counties in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, again, it's been great to have a front row seat of all that whole thing. So here, there's just great collaboration, and it's we've sort of did some thinking outside the box when we were setting up the human trafficking task forces in Berks and Lancaster County. So the unique aspect of what we're doing here is really it's birthed out of the generosity of Zoe International. So when it was during COVID, we were setting this up. And I did a bunch of research all across the state to find out what task forces were doing, what was working, what was not working. And what I found was there was many coalitions of nonprofits that wanted to do the work, but really didn't have the influence of government action to help move the ball down the field. So I got the idea, and because of my background in working specifically with the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office, I thought if we build the task force around the district attorney's office, but then have it backed up by Zoe being the coordinating organization, we could fill the gaps with both some of those are gaps with people, with mentors, advocates, but then also go ahead and collect all the other organizations after we vet them and see who can do and fill what portion. So collaboration really. This whole thing doesn't work without collaboration, but we have a lot of law enforcement, district attorney's office, prosecution side, and then the collaborative agencies, the social service agencies that come behind that. And it's without collaboration, it doesn't work. And it works really well. So what Zoe does here is I'm the coordinator of both these county task forces, and I'm sort of I joke that I'm the Rosetta Stone between law enforcement and social services, because a lot of times they don't speak the same language. But because I have the background in Zoe and have watched Zoe do what we do really well with the restorative part, plus I speak law enforcement, I can kind of watch what's going on and just kind of guide conversations. And sometimes I'm the one speaking for both sides with that. And that really seems to we're a bit of a unicorn here with that. That really seems to work well, and seems to be a little bit of we cracked a code there somehow. So that's pretty much what it's looking like here in Berks and Lancaster County.
And for those who are watching, what can you share in terms of what an operation looks like and what the hope would be in terms of the outcome of an operation?
We do a number of operations. Some of them are specifically law enforcement based, as far as looking at hotels that we know that are harboring traffickers or harboring trafficking within that. So we're looking at kind of going in the back door there of how can we set up stings to look at the infrastructure of hotels and how that's working. We also do stings where we're trying to locate women that are being trafficked. We do that through, I can't share a whole lot about that, but we do that through a lot of ads and things like that, and look investigatively of how we can invite those women to the sting setting, and then have our advocates have some interaction with that. One thing that we've been doing here that's really seems to work, and it's kind of fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see some stats as we continue to go, but we are pounding the demand for online sex. And we've seen that we may have moved the needle a little bit, and that so many arrests have been made for the Johns that that demand seems to be withering away a little bit. So we're tracking the Johns, what happens after they get arrested. We're tracking just our numbers here. And we're pretty pleased with what is happening so far. So there's a lot of force, a lot of effort going towards just trying to cut down on the demand. Once we start interacting and our advocates start interacting with the women on the stings, and we're on every sting that happens in Berks and Lancaster County, our hope there is to create and foster some type of a relationship. You know, we know that most of the women aren't going to identify as being trafficked. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they want out immediately. That happens every once in a while. But our hope is to take our advocates, which are trauma informed, and basically they are great at just loving people that in this situation, and possibly making a relationship with them and offering services and offering a relationship and a way out for them. And of course, as we know, what makes this work so hard is the trauma bond, and how that is just integrated into their thinking. And many times when we're working with these women, they're in just complete crisis mode at the time. But we tend to find ways our advocates tend to find ways through that in hopes of fostering a relationship.
That's amazing. And I love that you addressed the demand piece, because we often don't hear a lot about the demand. And we know that traffickers need to supply because of the demand, and we need to address that aspect of the problem as well. Dave, what does operations look like in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I'd say in Los Angeles, they're definitely going to go after the buyers. They're going after the sellers, the traffickers, and they're trying to identify victims of human trafficking. And they are doing operations year round. This is not just a targeted type of operation just during one time during the year. These are ongoing operations throughout the city, throughout the county. Law enforcement agencies all over the place are doing operations to go after the buyers, make arrests. They're going after traffickers, which can take a lot of investigative time to put that case together, and sometimes very dangerous aspects of those. So you've got those types of operations, or just the ones that try and identify potential victims of human trafficking. So to give you a snapshot, for example, there's something called Reclaim and Rebuild. And this was done this year. It was at the end of January, early February. And these operations occurred, and agencies, a lot of agencies got behind this throughout the state. But I can say that there were 177, I believe, rescues statewide, but 11 of those were children. 7 of those children were located here, right in Los Angeles. And the fact that these operations do occur because kids are still being trafficked on the streets of Los Angeles, sometimes openly on the street. Sometimes they're being, it's done through internet sources, and you've got to do some internet cyber investigative work to locate these kids. But the reality is there are kids being bought and sold on the streets of LA. This is not a problem that's just happening in a developing nation or around the world. It's right here in our backyard. And surprisingly, a lot of these are our own kids. These are kids that have grown up in these neighborhoods. These are kids that are vulnerable. And so these operations are really out there targeting really what we would say is rescue, really trying to identify people who could be a victim. And so Zoe has been invited to bring advocates on site. We've been doing that a lot with LAPD. We will, being there as part of the operations, everybody knows that there are victims who are really slow to disclose. They're going to be hesitant. Sometimes just the fact that they're law enforcement, they're going to be hesitant to say too much. Some people are there out of force or fear, or they're coerced there. There's people who are there that they don't even know that they're being trafficked. They don't recognize it. So having an advocate, someone who's trusted to talk to them and create space, and law enforcement allows space to happen because their heart is to help these victims in any way that they can. So the successes come because creating spaces like that, there has been great breakthrough, whether it could be a hotel operation or online investigative operations, open street operations, or even illicit massage parlor operations with foreign nationals who have been trafficked. We have seen success in all those different areas. And the fact that advocates are being allowed to be a part of those operations shows that it's another progression, I would say, in the fight against human trafficking. And that's where Zoe has been privileged to really step in and provide some assistance.
And a lot of the women that you talk with on those operations, they might appear to be there by choice initially, but what often is the reality of what might be going on behind the scenes?
It's a great question. I'll give you a story as an example. There was one girl, she was 17 years old. I remember speaking to her right after the police detained her to just to see. She's obviously underage. Nobody is doing that by choice underage, even if they think it is really their choice. It is considered trafficking, whether they think they're willingly doing something or not. They're too young to be making these decisions, and predators definitely target and coerce them. This girl was, she was contacted through social media by an influencer, someone who had a large following. This girl was not getting a lot of attention, but he gave her attention. He sent her a private message. He shared things she always wanted to hear, told her how beautiful she was. He invited her to a private party. Well, she wasn't getting a lot of attention. Now she's being invited to a private party by somebody she followed. And he's willing to send a car to pick her up. And then next thing she knows, at that party, she's doing things that she really never thought she would do, but she felt like it was okay because she trusted this man. And she ended up, she was being used and abused from the very first night she was there. She was bought nice clothes, taken to great dinners, but she was going out and meeting men. She was not getting any compensation for that, but she thought her boyfriend was, it was helping her boyfriend, and she did not at all recognize that she was being commercially trafficked because she was coerced into it. And that's just one example. You know, some people are there by coercion. Others are there because of desperation. Others are there because, and they may not necessarily be a victim, but others are in a situation like that because they're forced into it or threatened. Their families have been threatened. We've seen very violent traffickers, and we've even had it where traffickers have come to the door where the girl's at, and law enforcement has made the arrest there. Girls are panicking because their phone is going off every 15, 20 seconds. They're trying to call. They have to report in. If they don't report in, they've been burned, abused. Food can be withheld. It can be a really violent life for those, and that's why sometimes life expectancy can be shorter. We're in that life just because of the abuse that they tolerate. So it can look like a lot of different pieces. So I share that because sometimes in our minds we have one image of what trafficking is, and it's someone who is just is locked in a room and being held, and they literally got to break the door down and get them. It's not really, those cases do occur, but majority of what we're seeing are things I've just described.
And I had the privilege of going with you and law enforcement on the Reclaim Rebuild operations. And even in those situations, talking with some of the young women who were formerly foster youth or were formerly human trafficking victims. And I'm so grateful that because we were on site, we were able to offer them resources and connections to organizations that work with adults who now are continuing to provide case management for them. And some of them are actually now applying for victim compensation for being a former human trafficking victim. And so I'm so grateful that law enforcement allow us to be on these operations on site so that we can provide them with resources that they never had access to before. Along those lines, Brad and Dave, how can those who are watching, who are just so disturbed by what they're hearing and are grateful for what Zoe and law enforcement are doing, how can they get involved? What are some of the needs? How can they help?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Esther. And we get that question probably every week. And we're in a unique situation because most people, a lot of times when they ask that question, so I'll answer that in kind of two parts. But what most people, when they ask that question, they want to get hands-on and how can they help and how can they do things. But unfortunately, with our organization, because we work so closely with law enforcement and we're the trusted nonprofit in there, it's really hard to just invite people to what we're doing. So volunteer opportunities are pretty slim. I always say, whenever I'm speaking in churches or whatever the context, people say, well, how can we help? What can we do in our community? Just remember this thing. Well, first, educate yourself on what human trafficking really is. Education, this whole thing, I think really human trafficking is birthed out of people thinking it's not happening in my backyard. Things look a lot different here in Pennsylvania than they do in LA, but trafficking is happening here. So one of the things that Zoe tries to do here is through our prevention campaigns and our awareness campaigns of like, look, it is happening in our backyard, and here are some stories to prove that it is happening. So educate yourself, what is going on, and also know that the lifeblood of the trafficker is vulnerability. They cannot operate without vulnerability. So we can all do something to attack vulnerability in the people we know in our community. And that, doesn't mean just giving to Zoe, but giving to these, look at the organizations that are getting their hands dirty and trying to address the vulnerable population. People that are trafficked have the individual, societal, all these risk factors. And what those risk factors really mean that they're vulnerable to a trafficker coming in and influencing them. So when I'm asked that question, that's where I kind of get on my soapbox just for a little bit and just say, hey, vulnerability is where this all happens. So if you attack vulnerability, you are actually helping us fight human trafficking. But some things, just tangible things. One thing that we do use, we go through a lot of gift cards with on the stings, because sometimes these women, again, you have that financial vulnerability of them. So we try and come alongside them in that relationship building place. And hey, do you need money for food? Do you need money for groceries? Some of the women, because when they get to the stings, they take Ubers or whatever to the sting. So now they're here at our sting and now they can't get back to their home. So gift cards and even transit gift cards sometimes. So that's kind of one tangible way that people can help.
Thanks, Brad. And another practical way, if there aren't opportunities like what Brad described, Zoe International has a 10 to End campaign. Our goal is to have 10,000 people, mobilizing 10,000 people to join the fight against child trafficking. And you can visit endchildtrafficking.org to join how you can give $10 a month to support this effort. And now we have a special guest with us joining us, Lieutenant Robin Richards from Los Angeles Police Department's Internet Crimes Against Children, joining us today. Thank you, Lieutenant Richards, for joining us. Great to see you. Dave, if you wanted to go ahead, I know you have worked with the lieutenant. If you wanted to go ahead and ask him some of the questions that we have for him today.
Well, Lieutenant, thank you for being here. So the lieutenant is the ICAC Commander for Los Angeles, and he is the officer in charge of the Internet Crimes Against Children unit, and he's got a very rich background. He also has a background as being the South Bureau Human he was the officer in charge of the human trafficking bureau there too. So, Lieutenant, can you share a little bit for the audience? I don't think they would know really what either of those things mean. So maybe could you talk about your role in combating human trafficking with the Los Angeles Police Department, and also your current role as the ICAC Commander?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Dave. It's a pleasure for me to be here, meeting Brad and Esther for the first time. Indeed, it's a pleasure. As Dave mentioned, I was the officer in charge of human trafficking in Sub Bureau. Actually, that's where Dave and I met a few years ago. And we have established a relationship, a friendship, and fortunately, we're still working together. As you are aware, the issue in Sub Bureau with human trafficking, it's um, very perverse. It's very detailed. It's very bad. I heard Brad speak about it earlier, where the traffickers look for vulnerability in their victims. And Brad, you're spot on, because yes, that's where the traffickers seek to benefit, either by trying to find a minor who is the term low self-esteem, or probably having family issues, or whatever the case may be. Yes, then they try to prey on these victims in terms of offering them something lofty, where you and I know they're just trying to set them up to get them into that lifestyle. And thankfully, there are resources like Zoe, who is there to help law enforcement once we go in and we try to rescue these kids. We are fortunate to have someone like Zoe, like I said, and the other NGOs who are willing to step in and bridge the gap where these victims are concerned. They're truly victims. Um, at first, when I started working there, I thought, why don't they just walk away? But as soon as I started, I realized quickly it's not as easy as it said to just walk away. Um, Unfortunately, the traffickers have some mental grip, stronghold on these victims, and it really takes resources like Zoe in trying to break that hold of those traffickers. Fortunately, I can say, Dave, and as you know, yes, you have lots of success to where you have gotten through to these victims, and that's what we try to achieve, is trying to rescue one, just rescue one in the efforts that we do. So yes, um, human trafficking was very rewarding for us, for me particularly, because yes, whenever we offered that victim help, we initially arrest them, and from speaking to them during your investigation, you quickly realize that this person is a victim, and then we transition to rescue mode, where we're trying to get these victims some amount of resource to get them out of that life. And like I said, I know we do have some success stories, Dave, where we have gotten rescued a few of these victims from that lifestyle.
Right.
And in 2023, I transitioned to this capacity, where I'm the lieutenant in charge of the ICAC. ICAC stands for Internet Crimes Against Children, as Dave said. And what that is, it's a coordinated task force across the United States. There are 61 task forces. In every state, there is at least one ICAC task force. There are 2 states with 3 ICACs, which is Florida and Texas. And then we have 3 states, Illinois, Virginia, and New York, where there are 2 ICACs, and then California. California, we have 5 ICACs based on population size and everything. We have the Sacramento ICAC, San Jose ICAC, Fresno, Los Angeles, which I'm part of, and San Diego ICAC. I mentioned earlier that it's truly a coordinated task force, in that we investigate crimes committed against children on the internet. And because it's the internet, there are no state, federal, or boundary lines for these suspects. It runs the gamut from the city to the state, um, international. It's truly pervasive in these people going across state lines, country lines, and trying to victimize their kids. So when I say coordinated task force, it's not uncommon for the LA ICAC to have a suspect or a victim, and then somebody in Florida or New York or wherever, or even in California, working another ICAC, reaches out and says, yes, I have a suspect here, or I have a victim here. Can you help with that investigation? And of course, we will gladly help, just like the other task force will gladly help LA ICAC in whatever we need from them. Yes. So yes, that's what we do. It's very difficult, very challenging work, in that there are some, I say my words, evil individuals out there, where they abuse. We call it the most innocent among us, which is our children. But the reward for us is when we arrest these bad guys or we rescue the children. When we rescue the children, that's when our work is like, yes, we can look at those images, we can, absorb it, because yes, it's pretty bad. But like I said, the fact, or whenever we rescue a child, just one, we just need to rescue one, and yes, that's where the reward or the payoff come for us as investigators.
Yeah. One thing I remember hearing in one of the trainings that we were a part of is that it's estimated that 25% of those who are trading child sexual abuse material, CSAM, it's often known as child porn, but it's really child sexual abuse material. So that 25% of people who are downloading that, trading that, they are hands-on offenders. So behind a lot of these arrests, kids are directly being protected from those who are preying on kids, not just looking at imagery. They're actually going hands-on. So if you want to reflect on that and just what you've seen in this work.
Yes, Dave. There's a term we use in this industry called trusted individuals, and this is where someone of trust, i.e., a teacher, a police officer, a coach, or even a relative, i.e., a cousin, uncle. We deem those as what we call trusted individual. And yes, Dave. Oftentimes we do find that once we go into the situation, the house, um, yes, the abuser is right there. And like I mentioned earlier, while it's difficult work, whenever we come across those situations where we encounter what we call an hands-on offender, and we rescue a child, yes, that's where our reward comes in, because yes, we know we'll be taking that child from that abusive situation, and hopefully with the resources like the Department of Children and Family Services and entities like Zoe, we can possibly get these children some amount of help.
Sure. Lieutenant, how pervasive is this? And I would say that I know that there's proactive operations that are done and there's reactive.
Yes.
Because you get so many tips. But I think it would be eye-opening for the public to hear how pervasive this is.
Pervasive by definition.
Like NCMEC tips.
Yes, it gives a broad definition. But Dave, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Everybody has some electronic device on their person. So you think about it in that regard. Everyone has a cell phone, a laptop, a computer, some electronic devices. So we have what we call electronic service providers, which are like your Google, Microsoft, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They're what we call mandated reporters. So whenever these electronic service providers or the internet service providers detect CSAM, and you correctly categorize it earlier, while the penal code still says child pornography, we don't like to say that because child pornography denotes consent, and a child cannot give consent. So that's why we say CSAM, child sexual abuse material. Whenever these electronic service providers or internet service providers detect CSAM on their platform, they are mandated reporters. So they report to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is based in Virginia. NCMEC is like a clearinghouse. So whenever these electronic service providers report that CSAM to NCMEC, NCMEC gets that information, they triage it, and NCMEC says, where within that 61 coordinated task force should I send this cyber tip to for investigation? So again, looks at each cyber tip, it geolocates to a particular location, and from that, NCMEC sends it to the appropriate law enforcement entity to investigate. Okay, since I'm the LA ICAC, let's talk about LA ICAC. Dave, I'm by no means happy to say this, but we, the LA ICAC, we receive the most cyber tip of the 61 coordinated task force across the country. So you talk about pervasive, this is happening right among us. There's a phrase we like to use in our training videos, and we say the suspect predator is hiding in plain sight. Because yes, they are right there. And to put this in context, Dave, we, the LA ICAC, last year, 2024, we received almost 39,000 cyber tips. Simple math, that's over 3,000 cyber tips per month. I believe the next closest ICAC to us was around 24, 25,000 cyber tips. So that put that in perspective as to how many cyber tips we're talking about. This year, again, unfortunately, I can tell you, Dave, we're on pace for about 50,000 cyber tips this month.
Wow.
So it's very pervasive. Then you're going to say to me, Lieutenant, how do you investigate so many cyber tips? Granted, we, the LA ICAC Task Force, we cover 5 counties, which is Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, San Bernardino County, LA County, which is us, and Orange County. So within those 5 counties, we have 108 law enforcement entities that works collaboratively with us in trying to investigate this very, very horrible crime. So when we get that cyber tip from NetMec, we further triage it in our office, and then we say where within our task force should we send that to, and then we send it to those the appropriate entity for investigation. So while it is a lot of cyber tips, we do need help in investigating these cyber tips. Something you touched on also, Dave. For cyber tips, you mentioned proactive and reactive investigation. A cyber tip is what we call a reactive investigation because obviously the action occurred already where the electronic service providers, they receive some notification via their services, by the algorithms rather, indicating that someone was possessing CSAM on their platform. So that's what we call a reactive investigation. Then you have a proactive investigation. A proactive investigation is when we as law enforcement assumes the identity of someone else, i.e. a minor, 13, 14-year-old, and we go on the different platforms. And then we have the bad guys coming to meet us thinking they're coming to meet a minor. So that's what you call a proactive investigation. And yes, there are hundreds of websites where these horrible individuals live and they try to meet minors. And during my time here at ICAC, we have made quite a few arrests where our investigators went online pretending to be a minor, and the bad guys did show up to meet what they thought or who they thought was a minor to have sexual intercourse with a 10, 11, 12, 14-year-old. So it's very pervasive. So our mission, part of our mission is to arrest the bad guys and arrest kids, but we also try to educate the public, Dave.
Yes.
Like forums like this, which I'm very appreciative of being here today. Forums like this is where we try to reach out to the public to tell them this is happening. We don't want to bury our heads in the sand to think it's not happening. The evidence is the number of cyber tips that we receive. And I'm telling you, we do receive these cyber tips. So this is happening. So we have to try and educate the public as best we can. And what do I mean by that? By saying, be aware of what your child is doing. I'm not saying for you to be the helicopter type parent. Yes, you have to give your child some amount of latitude and space and allow your child to grow. But we just say be involved. Be involved from an early age. Have that conversation with your child from an early age. Sextortion now is a big deal where people are pretending to be someone else and they ask a child for an explicit picture. And once they get that explicit picture, then they extort the child for money. And we have seen incidents of up to death where these kids feel like there's no hope. So we try to speak to parents and we tell them, if your child should fall into that situation, most times the child feel like there's no hope, there's no one they can go to. So we try to say, have that relationship with your child. Yes, the child did something wrong. It's awful, it's terrible, but hopefully you are the one that your child can come and speak to. Mom, Dad, this is what happened. This is what's going on. What can I do? How can we get out of this situation? Versus the child trying to handle it by himself and then eventually, do something horrible up
Right.
to taking their life.
Right. I'm so glad you shared that and the tips that you just gave, because there are things that can be done. And
Yes.
unfortunately, people look back and there's sometimes just deep regret that they feel like they could have done something more. So I know you and the team do great work doing that. We at Zoe try to do that as well too. It's a privilege to be able to work with you and the ICAC team as well. And I would just say to everybody, you'll have a chance to meet the lieutenant. Tomorrow we have Zoe's Rescue Walk. It's at Shepherd of the Hills Church in Porter Ranch, and 9 a.m. is registration. But he's going to be there too. He'll be sharing to the crowd as well. And I'd also say that because this is such an important thing, that we just want to cooperate and work with them to really spread the word. So I think also, I'm not sure if you were going to hit this, Esther, but I think I'll just mention it. There's going to be a Protecting Kids Online event as well that we will be doing with ICAC to go much deeper into what parents can do to protect their kids. And that's going to be on May 18th at 6 p.m. So,
Dave, before you
yeah.
go, may I say one more thing with regards to what parents can do? NECMEC does offer tons of resources for
Yeah.
victims, and there is a feature on NECMEC platform which is called Take It Down. This is
Right.
where if a child posted something when they were minor, and it's out there and they think there's no end, yes, NECMEC will work with law enforcement and that victim to quote unquote take it down. And take it down means that through different algorithms, NECMEC will notify all the different electronic service provider, do not post this image again based on the hash value of the picture.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's very important. So again, if we say now to kids, yes, it probably wasn't the wisest idea to post a nude picture of yourself, but in the event that did happen, all is not lost. There is a means to do some rectifying of the situation.
Yeah.
With NECMEC, take it down.
It's a really important resource because it feels so helpless for people when they encounter that and they don't know what to do. Well, there are steps you can do. So that's an important resource, the Take It Down with NECMEC. On the line still is Brad. And, Brad, before you came to Zoe, you were an ICAC detective. You've been part of this whole discussion with the lieutenant. Is there anything you want to add based on your experience as well, as far and related to internet crimes against children?
Yeah, just really, that's where I got my start in. That led me to working with Zoe. But I think really and to the lieutenant's point, there's so much exploitation that happens online, and that's one thing. Prior to myself getting into and being trained as an ICAC detective, I was a detective for probably 15 years before that. And my eyes were opened, even with all that experience of how much exploitation is out there on the internet for children. And again, there's I think Lieutenant, you hit the nail on the head. There's so much that is going on with these kids that probably could be stopped with a little bit of communication between them and their parents. And a lot of times this happens. Some of this stuff happens because there is no parental guidance, or there's really no boundaries for the children online. But also, when a child gets in a bad spot, then you really learn what the communication is between the parent and the child, because so many times the child just feels stuck. And then they get in a crisis and just start making some really bad decisions of what takes place.
Yeah. Thank you for your insights and for continuing to fight for the vulnerable, Brad. The East Coast, for the audience listening, they're doing amazing work in 2 counties. A lot of coordination with law enforcement out there, state and federal and local. So great work on the East Coast, Brad. As we close this segment out, I want to throw it back to the lieutenant. I'm not sure if there's any particular story that stands out to you throughout your years at ICAC that would be something that would be insightful for those listening to hear.
Dave, there are a few, but I'll just touch on one. I see Brad smiling. We had an investigation recently where this this young man in LA. He was abusing this young lady in Texas, and he had established a relationship with this young lady for 2 years, and it's what we call the 764 series. And Brad probably is aware of that series. And this young man here in LA, he would have his victim do all sorts of terrible things to herself, i.e., cut her body, have her conditioned to the point where she would throw up on demand, killed animals. And we believe he was probably grooming her to eventually take her own life. And I talked about a coordinated task force earlier. This was an investigation in Texas, and it stretched here to California because our suspect was here. Actually, the suspect had groomed this 12-year-old so much that she had everything from him. He knew everything about her. She knew everything about him. When she called us the first time, she gave us his driver's license. That's how comfortable the suspect was with her in the grooming process. And she told the suspect that LAPD was coming. Yes, when we went the search warrant, I think you did the search warrant with us, Dave. The suspect wasn't there. He went to work. We called him. All the devices were wiped when we got there, but sure enough, he was so addicted to her seeing her images. He had everything on his phone still. So while he had wiped all his hard drive, he could not get away. He could not delete all the images from his cell phone. And yes, we finally got him because he came back home, and we saw the evidence on full display on his device. So yeah, that was another. I mean,
Yeah.
while she was in Texas and we are here in California, in actuality, that was a rescue for us because yes, she was no longer going to be abused by this person. I mean, that's one. There are a few stories where uncle was abusing his sister's children, and the sister did not believe it. But yes, when we showed her the evidence, yes, it was an eye opener for her. And again, rescuing children is makes our life worth what we're doing.
Yes, and I just have to say I'm so impressed with the professionalism of the LA ICAC team. They're truly some of the best that are out there, and we really applaud the work that's going day in and day out. I think there's a calling for that kind of work, and if you in the law enforcement circle, I know this too. Not every law enforcement officer can step into that. It takes people with a dedication and a very special calling, and so we just salute you. We thank you to you and your team. Thank you for coming out tomorrow to join us at the Rescue Walk, and we look forward to the May 18th event.
Yes, and it will be a pleasure for me to be there tomorrow, Dave. It will be a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Brad, did you have a story that stands out to you?
Specifically, would you like a East Coast story, ICAC story? Which would you like?
Any of the stories that really stand out to some of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, and there's been times here, I guess. A story I wouldn't mind sharing was just here locally in the East Coast of a sting we were doing, and I think the lieutenant also hit the nail on the head when the question that most everyone asks, and we answer this question often, and the public thinks of why don't they walk away? There was a case here about 2 years ago where we're doing a sting in a hotel, and the trafficker ended up dropping her off at the hotel, and our advocates began meeting with her, and red flags were all over the place that she was obviously being trafficked, and she was shaking. That's how scared she was. And then she knew that law enforcement had done some interdiction in the parking lot and had started talking to him and doing the investigation there. And I think really the heartbreaking part about the story that I'm sharing is just an education for the public of why don't they walk away. This poor girl was in such crisis, and she was over 18, so she was free to leave, and she didn't have to receive any of the services that we were offering. But you could just see the crisis in her because we would call what he would be a Romeo pimp. She loved him, and she was providing services to men to basically to financially support him. in the interview with him, it was obvious that he was trafficking her, and police did a great job in getting enough evidence to arrest him for trafficking, even though we didn't have her full support. Later on, so he went to jail. She left. Later on, about I believe it was 8 months later, she ended up calling the detective, the main detective in the case, and says, "Look, I get it now. I realize I'm being trafficked and I need some help." She was in Ohio. We worked with the Department of Homeland Security to get her out of the situation and bring her back here. But again, it was just one of those things that this is the reality of the work that we do, that human trafficking victims are just so immersed in the trauma bond, and they're in such crisis that they're just not seeing things, clearly. And it was just one of those things of those of us on the front line see this, and it's heartbreaking because there's so much. We would do anything for her at that moment to offer the resources, and there was really nothing that we could do. We just had to watch her walk away. But then we did see that a little bit of at least the light come on later on of, yes, I am being trafficked.
Thank you so much for what you both do in leadership and helping us in this fight. We're so grateful, just even you sharing today and educating the public. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
So in closing, we just want to thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us today, for your support of our mission to reach every person and rescue every child. Again, to learn more about Zoe, tomorrow we will be having a rescue walk in Southern California at Shepherd Church in Porter Ranch. It will be from 9 to 12. You can visit zoerescuewalk.org. It's not too late to register. You can come and check in begins at 9. And like we mentioned throughout this live stream, we have a 10 to End campaign that is to mobilize 10,000 people in this fight to help end child trafficking and raise $2 million to sustain our programs this year in 2025. You can visit endchildtrafficking.org for that initiative. And as Dave mentioned, we will be having a Protecting Kids Online training here in Southern California. You can visit our website under trainings and register for that training. It will be at Rocky Peak Church in May. Thank you so much for joining today.
Over the past 10 years, human trafficking has grown exponentially. It's in our country,
Our cities.
our homes.
Today, millions of children are trapped in modern-day slavery. Can it end? We've done it before.
History has shown that when enough dedicated people rally together, change is inevitable. All it can take is 10 minutes,
10 letters.
$10.
10 people telling others about the horrors of this industry. Human trafficking is the human rights issue of our time.
But it doesn't have to be.
Let's end it.